Evet, Uzay Çağında Yolculuğun yeni bir yayınına hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Bugün SpaceX'in Starship aracının yeni bir testiyle beraberiz. Bildiğiniz üzere SpaceX Starship roketini yörüngeye ulaştırmadan önce bu aracı bir dizi testlere tabi tutuyor ve şu anda hala o testlerden devam ediyoruz. Bugün gördüğünüz üzere, ekranda da gördüğünüz üzere Starship'in neticesi olan Supreme'nin bir statik ateşleme testi olacak. Artık bu saatten sonra motor sayıları artmaya başladı zaten. Bir motorla başladılar. Sonrasında 3 motora çıkardılar. Ardından da geçtiğimiz günlerde SpaceX bu iticide bir spin prime testi yani akış testi yaptı. Motor akış testi yaptı. Ve bu testte bayağı fazla sayıda motordan yakıt akıtıldı. Yani sayısı bilinmiyor buhardan dolayı. Yani 10 diyen de var, 20 diyen de var, 33 diyen de var. Bunu göreceğiz bakalım şimdi. Ya tabii ben 33 motor beklemiyorum bugün. 33 motorun ateşlenmesini beklemiyorum ama SpaceX bizi şaşırtabilir tabii ki. Güzel. Remote, selamlar. Hoş geldiniz. Teşekkür ederiz. Tamam geldim. Biraz daha bekleyeyim seni.
Possibly some more spin primes, and obviously we need to make that 33 Raptor static fire, and then possibly some stacking operations and more testing. And we're still waiting for the official FAA launch license, which is coming down the pike. It sounds like, but probably we don't know when it's going to come at any point. But whenever that comes, that'll be the biggest indication that we have that yes, they're getting ready for launch soon. But yeah, really could be any time. As much as we joke about 2 weeks, it could be as soon as 2 weeks, but it could
Evet
also
tamam
be
geri
as
geldim.
late as
Full stack bugün mü? Yok bugün full stack
we
olmayacak. Şu
really don't
anda
know. And the way that
SpaceX'in
this stuff
Supreme'i
works,
ateşlemesi gerekiyor
just have to
öncelikle.
wait and
Yani
find
gördüğünüz
out.
üzere.
That's why we're all
Yani
Texas
şu
tank
andan yakıt
watchers, right?
yüklemesi yapılıyor. Burada
Right,
gördüğünüz
exactly.
mouse
I'm still
gözüküyor mu
holding
orada?
true, and again, I'm
Aşağıda.
going to just keep saying this
Ha.
until I'm proven
Yani
wrong.
gördüğünüz üzere
My
beyaz bir
prediction:
hat
Starship makes
oluştu
an
burada.
orbital
Şu
attempt
anda
on the.
Supreme'ye
I
hem
guess
sıvı
that's
oksijen
the
hem de sıvı metan
sixth.
dolduruluyor.
Wait, hold on, I gotta get the year right.
Doldurulan
Yeah,
miktara
5 year.
göre yani
5 year
motor sayısını
anniversary
az
of the
çok
Falcon Heavy test flight next
tahmin
February.
edebiliriz.
That's
Bunu
my
buradan
go-to
bakacağız.
guess these days.
Dediğimiz gibi geçtiğimiz günlerde
Seeming
o
like that is
spin
becoming
prime
more and more
testinden
likely
sonra
as
bayağı
time
bir
goes on.
tahminler
Sad
havada
message
uçuşuyor
from
işte.
Nick.
Kim istedik işte
Listen, February will be here before
33
you
motor
know it.
yaptık şimdi 33 motor ateşleme yapacağız dedi.
But
Kimisi
anyway,
Yeah, but
işte
that
ya
is
olsa bile
so
daha az başlar dedi
that's
ki
the sad
ben de
message.
bu
that's
ikinciden
true.
yanayım. Büyük ihtimal böyle olacak.
Let's see. Here is a question from the #1 SpaceX fan. That's probably debatable. I'm sure others would contest that username, but they've got the username. So, does NASA require that all human-rated rockets have an escape system, and will Starship?
Şeyden
That
konuşalım biraz
is
şimdi.
not
Daha
a
demin
firm
hatta birkaç
requirement.
saat
It depends on the
öncesinde
program. For
Blue
example,
Origin
the Commercial Crew
NS-23 görevini
program was
fırlattı
required to
ve
have
görev
in-flight abort
başarısızlıkla
system.
sonuçlandı. Uçuş
But
sırasında
not all
iticide bir
human-rated
sorun
vehicles
meydana
need to
geldi.
have that. NASA has already
Sonra meydana
contracted
gelmesinden
with
sonra zaten kapsül ayrıldı.
Space
Acil
contracted
kaçış
with
sistemi
SpaceX
devreye
for
soktu.
Starship
Uzaklaştırdı kendini.
to be the moon lander,
İticide
right? A human
patladı.
landing system variant of Starship.
Ya tabii
And
bu
even though
yani
that doesn't
insan taşıyan bir
launch
itici
crewed from
değildi. Yani
Earth,
daha önceki insan
even
uçuşları bu
once
itici
crew is
taşımadı.
on board during the
Ama yine
landing
de
and
ilginç
launch from the moon,
sonuçta
there's no like in-flight
yani
abort capability there.
artık 20. uçuşlara
SLS
bilemiyorum. Yani
has
tabii olabilir bu
in-flight
tür
abort
şeyler ama
capability
ilginçti izlemesi.
during launch from Earth.
Ama en
But
azından Blue
all things
Origin'in
considered, it's not a hard requirement or like across
bu
all
konuda
human-rated systems. Of
şeffaf
course,
olması
the space
güzeldi.
shuttle
Bu güzel
didn't
bir
have an
geri dönüş
in-flight
oldu
abort
Blue
system.
Origin'e.
Yeah, I was going to say at the risk of summoning
Murat
a
teşekkür
Chris,
ederiz.
fairly
Bu
confident
SS ne oluyor?
the
Erteleniyor
space
sürekli.
shuttle didn't
Ertelemesi
have an
normal
in-flight
ya.
abort
Uzay
after
mekiğine
those
baktığımızda
fuel
uzay mekiğinin de tüm
contingencies.
ertelemeleri hep bu tür şeylerden
Right.
kaynaklanıyor. İşte sızıntılardan
So it's not a hard
kaynaklanıyor.
requirement. There are other ways of
Şu
demonstrating that the
anlık
vehicle is safe and keeping
bu yakıt doldurma
the
arayüzünü
crew safe on those
o
launch
kısmını
vehicles.
değiştirdiler. İşte sonunda olan kısmını
If
değiştirdiler.
you do sufficient
Şimdi
testing
tek bir
and
şey
have enough
kaldı. O da
redundancy in the system,
imha sisteminin
things like an in-flight abort aren't the
bataryaların
only way to
onaylanması.
protect the crew and make sure they're
Fazla
safe.
hemen kısayım.
On that topic, I'm
Tamam.
getting a lot of messages
Kısmı
about this in chat,
söyledik.
and I do want
Bu
to
batarya kısmının
quickly address it. It's not super
bu
relevant to today's coverage,
ne
but
derler?
it is
Menzile
topical.
bakan yani o
New Shepard
uçuş
did have
alanında,
their
uçuş
own New Shepard
süreci
flight
boyunca
earlier this morning
roketin
that
geçeceği yerleri
was
kontrol
ended in
eden
an in-flight abort. It was not a crewed flight. It was
ne
a
derler?
uncrewed research mission.
Kurum mu
But
diyebiliriz?
nonetheless,
İşte
the
kurum diyelim.
capsule successfully
Kurumun
aborted
onaylaması
and
gerekiyor.
made a
Çünkü
safe
normalde
landing. The
SS
booster
uçuş
was
bataryaları
lost
20 gün
due to some failure
kadar
of the
şey olabiliyor. Yani yeni mi falan kullanabiliyor. Şu an NASA'nın derdi bunu uzatmak. Eğer bunu uzatabilirse yani araç birleştirme binasına VAB'ye gitmeyecek. Ama tabii yapamazsa gitmek zorunda. Şevval merhaba, hoş geldin. Hoş geldin. Şimdi SS'deki durum bu. Eğer bunu hallederlerse 23 ya da 27'si mi? 23 ya da 27'sinde bir pencereyi yakalıyorlar. Bugün uçmayacak, hayır. Genel olarak ne zaman dersen bilemiyoruz. Testlere bağlı. Testler başarılı devam ederse artık son olarak 33 motorda ateşlerlerse, bir de tek başına iç halkadaki motor, o 10 motor mu? 10 motorda ateşlerlerse, yok 10 değil, 13, özür dilerim. 13 motorda ateşlerlerse başarıyla ateşledikten sonra büyük ihtimalle birleştirirler Starship ve Super Heavy'yi. Bir daha 33 motor ateşlerler diye düşünüyorum onun ardından ve artık geri kalan tek şey uçuş olur. Tabii birkaç kez de VDR yaparlar işte. Tüm aracı doldururlar işte nitrojenle. Ardından da boşaltırlar. İşte kaç kere yaparlar bilmiyorum. Yani bu VDR işlemini tamamladıktan sonra tek uçuş kalır. İyimserlikle bakarsak bu yıl yani sonbahar sonu Aralık ortası arası diye tahmin edebilirim. İyimser olursam. Kötümser olursam 2023'ün bahar ayı derim. Belki daha da kötümser olup 2023 yazı da diyebilirim. Artemis'in tabii ki olacak. Tabii ki olacak. Şu an sadece beklemedeyiz. NASA'yı bekliyoruz şu an sadece. Yani ne yapacaklarını bekliyoruz. VAB'ye giderseniz büyük ihtimal Ekim'e ertelenir bu yayın. Gitmezse yakın bir zamanda bir Artemis yayını görebiliriz. Kaç motorun ateşlenmesi bekleniyor? Yani 3'ten fazla. 3 ile 33 arası diyebiliriz şu an. Emir hoş geldin dostum. Hoş geldin. Teşekkür ederiz. Şu anlık yakıt miktarına bağlı olarak yani bu iticide gördüğümüz beyaz çizgiye bağlı olarak yani kaç motor ateşleneceğini tahmin edebiliriz. Olağanüstü derecede bir artarsa yani mesela şuradaki gördüğüm, gerçi mouse gözükmüyor değil mi? Ne yazık ki. Gözükmüyor. Evet. Yani booster'ın o shine dediğimiz sivri kısmından oraya kadar gelirse artık belki o kadar da gerekmez ama olsun. Yani oraya yaklaşırsa bilin ki bayağı yüksek sayıda motor göreceğiz. Tamam, 2 yapalım da.
Similar to Falcon 9.
Aluminum?
I believe.
I'd imagine aluminum.
Exact alloy, I'm sure.
Geçen yaptığımız yayında amaç büyük ihtimal 3'tü. Yani bir tanesi ateşleniyor gibi oluyor ama ateşlenmiyor sonrasında. 3'tü ama ikisi ateşlendi. Evet, doğru bu. Sonrasında bir motor değişikliği yaptılar araçta. Bir motor değiştirdiler. Ama tabii ateşlenmeyen motor olmayabilir çünkü biraz daha farklı bir şeydi. Çünkü iç halkadan bir motor değişti. Büyük ihtimal başka bir şeydi bu.
And possibly a little bit sturdier than SLS. Actually, I would almost guarantee it's sturdier than SLS's main tank at the expense of weight.
It is definitely aluminum. I don't think NASA has announced like the alloy. Although maybe Phillips also up here somewhere be like, actually it's this one. But
umarım genç ateşlerine ben de yemeğe gidip gelirim ben. Onu umuyorum.
And of course it's got that spray-on foam insulation.
Ben de onu umuyorum cidden.
Insulation on the outside, but the aluminum itself underneath is, normal.
Evet, aynen. Oo, şey de gelmiş, Paul da gelmiş. Anket de gelmiş.
Aerospace grade aluminum.
Siren mi?
It's just aluminum foil. They just
Yok canım, siren değildir ya.
From the grocery store, they wrapped it up. No
spray some foam on it. It's good to go. Couple of other messages to bring in here. Ron says that Mary deserves a 33 Raptor honk salute. I agree. Hopefully that would be cool to see. Appreciate that. Still seeing some engine chill underneath with the liquid oxygen venting from the launch mount there. That frost ring is kind of holding steady at the bottom of the booster right now, not really growing too much. Don't know what that may indicate for today's testing, but we'll keep an eye on it.
Yok siren yok, siren yok. Daha siren yok. Olmasın. Şu an siren olmasın ya.
Okay. We could buy like a custom siren if we need one.
Just
like,
buy our own.
get our own
Yollamaz ya,
single.
yollayamaz. Yani çünkü hazır olmaz. Ya gerçi tabii Artemis'in durumuna bağlı. Düşün şurasında Ekim'e bir ay kalıyor. Ne bileyim, şu anda Ekim falan deyince çok ileri bir tarih gibi geliyor da değil cidden. Şu an Eylül'deyiz.
They play like, I don't know, some Disney sounds on the big foghorn, so it's like we need to get something like that, but with claxtons to sing happy birthday. That was really
Nice.
convoluted, and that's why I should have just shut up. But I decided not to. So we're talking for 30 seconds. Sorry, guys.
Man. We got John McGraw
Güzel.
became a red
Ya
team,
tek
so
isteğim bir
appreciate
Spin
that
Prime görmemek de
support. Jeremy
gerçi ama
Blocker
statik
chiming in
ateşleme
with
şey
another
geldi.
happy birthday, Mary.
Statik
Of
ateşleme
course,
için
it's
uyarı
Mary.
geldi.
Shout out to Mary and
Spin
wishing
Prime
her
gelir o
a
yüzden
good
diye
day.
tahmin ediyorum. Umarım.
A couple of the members that have come in here. Bart
Yoksa boşuna
became a
yayınlaşmış
Pet Rat
oluruz.
member, so appreciate that. Carl also became a Pet Rat member, so thank you. Jeffrey,
Ya
at the
ama
Capcom level, hope to see you
ya
over
o
in the
seviyeye dikkat etmek
Discord
gerekiyor. O
at
şu anki
level.
sıvı oksijen
And
seviyesine dikkat
Curtis
etmek
became
gerekiyor.
a red team
Sonuçta
member,
bize
so appreciate
kaç motor
all of
olacağını
that
en azından
support.
tahmin olarak verecek olan şey bu.
Here's a good question from Luca asking
Şimdi
why do we see
geçenlerde,
the
şimdi
LOX tank
geçenler
most
dediğimde
but not the methane
Cuma ya da
tank?
Perşembe, ikisinden biri. SpaceX S-24'ü ateşledi. 6 motorunu ateşledi. Bayağı güzel de bir ateşlemeydi. Oo, Anıl abi hoş geldin.
No, yeah,
Seviyorsun.
take it, that'd be great.
Couple different things. So first of all,
6 motorunu ateşledi
notice if you're
Starship.
looking at the
Vakum
right-hand
motorları da
side of your view,
birlikte.
if you look up at
Ateşleme sırası
never
bayağı
mind,
büyük,
Dust
yani
changed
bir
the camera on me, so
yangın
I can
çıktı.
point out
Etraftaki
something I
şeyleri
need to point
yaktı.
out.
Çalıları vesaire yaptı. Sonra
Sonra
SpaceX bunu yani daha da yayılmasını önlemek için
I can come back to it.
ya
I'll
kasıtlı
circle back
yangın
to it. Take your
başlattı.
time.
O işte
Okay.
yayılmaması için
The
belli
overall
bölgeleri
premise
yaktı,
is that
sınırları
the Raptor
yaktı.
engines
Bu şekilde
do use more liquid oxygen
yani
than
önüne geçmiş oldu, hem
methane.
de
It's just a
aradaki
mixture
bölgeyi de
of those two
temizlemiş oldu
propellants
yani
that
sonraki
they can
ateşlemeler
use.
için.
Okay,
Yangın
so
da
it's
ayrı bir
based
risk
partially on
bu
chemistry,
anlamda.
partially based on what temperatures you want
Starship sonra
inside the
inşallah
engine and by
bir
adjusting it
1.6 veya daha
from
fazla
the
motor ateşler.
stoichiometric
Ben de bunu ümit ediyorum. Umarım yani 6 veya daha
ratio, which
fazla
is
olur.
if you were trying to burn every single molecule of both methane and oxygen, and like it's like the chemically perfect ratio of the two. However, that usually results in like really high temperatures in the engine, and you
Ben
can
şu
normally adjust the
NSF
ratio.
yenileyim. Bir yenilenmesi gerekiyor şu sayfanın. Çünkü saçma sapan çalışıyor.
And that usually helps keep the engine environment a little bit better controlled.
Tamamdır. Şimdi galiba düzeldik.
Without it hurting your performance too much. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing there. There's a ratio, and now you can see it on the right-hand side.
Yo, bugün ya eğer yıllıktan bir yönüm 3 istiyorsa 6 değil yani daha fazla ateşlemeli de. Ya şimdi sadece ateşlemeye bakmak gerekmiyor. Uçuş lisans
What you're seeing there is some stringers or some smaller structures on the outside of the booster that help keep the
Ready
booster
tank. Hayır hayır
rigid in
Latif
that
hayır.
rotation.
Hayır.
And it's there because that's where the liquid oxygen tank and the liquid methane tank are joined inside the booster. That's where the common dome is. That separates the two tanks. Above on the top is the methane tank, and on the bottom is the liquid oxygen tank. And you'll see that the liquid oxygen tank is much taller than the methane tank. Again, alluding to that ratio of the two propellants that gets used. So that is one
Detank nerede? Ben detank şeyini göremedim.
big thing is to then notice that the methane that they're loading onto the vehicle is not going, well, it's going into the top methane tank.
Lepedro nerede
But
bilmiyorum.
it's
NSF'den bir şey
being
yok.
loaded into that transfer tube that takes the propellant from the methane tank down to the
Pek bir şey
engine
görünmüyor.
through the liquid oxygen tank. And so there's a lot of propellant sitting in that tube right now when they start loading methane, and you would only see frost form on the methane tank once that transfer tube is completely full, and the propellant not only fills the tube but also fills the bottom of that common dome and reaches the outer tank walls. That's when the tank would get cold enough for frost to develop. So you see liquid oxygen frost develop way sooner because it's not going into a transfer tube. The liquid oxygen tank is already on the bottom. And so as soon as you fill basically the bottom dome of the liquid oxygen tank, you'll start seeing frost. Also, the last thing here to consider is when they are loading propellant for these vehicles, there is sometimes a weight requirement.
Görünmeyecek şekilde.
Mitigate the weight of the booster being held by the launch.
Pek sanmıyorum ya. Ses de yok çünkü.
We talked about how we would expect more prop to be loaded for more engines firing, not because the engine firing is long enough to drain all that propellant, but simply because they want the vehicle to be a little bit heavier. So those things considered, they might end
Latif
up
bir şey
loading
fotoğraf falan alsana bana Discord'dan.
Our guess is that they just load extra liquid oxygen rather than extra liquid methane. And that might be alluding to the fact that it's way easier to vent liquid oxygen. It's a way it's not a harmful gas to just release into the atmosphere, unlike methane vapors. So they probably just opt to, okay, we have the propellant for the fire
Azalma var.
itself. Now let's load enough liquid
Belki şu an
oxygen.
doldurmuyor da olabilir. O yüzden de olabilir.
That's speculation to be sure. But all things considered, those are the different reasons that you're seeing liquid oxygen, frost, but not.
Şu an doldurmuyorlar da olabilir. Ondan emin değilim.
I hope that might have been a
Şimdi yeni bir
rambling
sistemden
answer, but I
bahsetmemiz
think I
gerekiyor.
covered it
Yörünge
in
rampası için. Geçtiğimiz günlerde SpaceX çalışanları şey yaptı. Rampayı bir modifiye etti ve bir ses bastırma sistemi geldi sanırsam. Çünkü yani yeni borular var etrafında ve su borularına benziyor. Direkt metal boru. Herhangi bir instalasyon vesaire yok. Eğer durum buysa artık beklediğim sistem geliyor. Ateşleme, yani daha büyük ateşlemeler için ses bastırma sistemi geliyor gibi. Görünüş o görünüş.
A question for you here, Nick. We're talking about optimistic timelines again, so get ready. When do you think we could see a full stack? This week, maybe?
Well, I mean, possibly. That thought did briefly go through my mind today as I was looking at everything. The ship is connected to the crane, which would mean that all they need to do a full stack is to move the ship from the suborbital pad B to suborbital pad A. Where's it going? The orbital launch pad next to the chopsticks. We have seen those pins installed on the chopsticks that allows it to pick up a Starship.
Şimdi
that is a good sign towards full stack.
Şey ihtimalleri artmaya başladı. Full stack ihtimalleri yani tamamen yani Starship Supreme'in birleştirme ihtimali artmaya başladı. Yani çünkü Starship ikinci ateş bu altı motorla ateşlemesini yapınca altı motorla ateşleme yapınca hemen vinci bağladılar Starship'e. Ardından da bu Mekazilla'nın kollarındaki Starship adaptörleri takıldı. Bu yüzden bu biraz ihtimalleri arttı. Bunlardan da insanlar şey demeye başladı işte. İşte birleştirme ihtimali arttırdı. Tabii öncelikle bence booster'ın testlerini tamamlaması gerekiyor. Sonuçta daha yapacağı bayağı bir şey var. Yani ateşleme anlamında. Bunları yaptıktan sonra birleştirilip bir daha bir ateşleme yapsa bence uçuş için güzel bir veri olur. Teşekkür ederiz Volta. Teşekkür ederiz. Teşekkür ederim.
Other questions here. Justin Wayne asking, how likely are SLS and Starship to make their first launches within a month of each other?
Ooh, well, hopefully, as a photographer who wants to be at both of these events, I hope they're not too soon to
Right. Not so close that we can't travel between the two places. That's true.
Exactly. Just enough time.
Evet, Blue Origin'de öyle bir olay oldu. Bakalım. Ya sorun neymiş tam olarak? Ya motordan kaynaklı o belli. Zaten motor kapanıyor. Ama kapanırken de bayağı büyük bir alev çıkarıyor. Yani birkaç şey gördüm Twitter'da. Turbo pompalarla da ilgili diyen var. Olabilir. Benim ilk yorumum şeydi, motor patlamasıydı. Olabilir tabii bu da. Yani, turbo pompanın patlaması olabilir. SLS kastediyorsan eğer yani SLS'in Ay'a gitmesi ne zaman bulur? Yani daha çok gelişmelere bakmamız gerekiyor sonuçta şu anda. Batarya işinin bir çözülmesi gerekiyor. FPS bataryalarının çözülmesi gerekiyor. Çözülürse eğer 23'ü veya 26'sı yani en erken tarih. NASA'nın belirlemesi gerekiyor. Tabii hava durumu da önemli bu konuda.
Well, we don't really know what their exact plan is for this 33.
Buna bakacağız. Yani BAB'ye gitmezse yani Ekim'den önce olabilir diyorum. Ya o koymadan o kadar yani, ya öncül tank kişinin estimini dışında o kadar bir önemi yok bence. Yani sonuçta asıl birinci amaç uçurmak yani yörüngeye ulaşması. Yörüngeye ulaştıktan sonra büyük ihtimal zaten atmosfere girerken parçalanacak. O yüzden yani öncül tank kısmının test edilmesi de o kadar önemli değil. Zincirleri kırar uçar. Öyle. Uçar bu arada abi. Net uçar.
Caution and care in as they prepare this 33 engine static fire. So I would not be surprised if they take their time and be nice and slow and careful with it, because that's going to be a lot of propellant. As far as having ship 24 on top of the booster, I could see it as a possibility. I mean, if they need more mass, that is a really easy way to get some more mass on top. However, it is going to be a lot more risky.
20'ninle ilgili yeni bir haber yok ya. İşte en son alımlar başvurular başlamıştı geçen yıl. Hala devam ediyor büyük ihtimalle. İşte başvuruları kapandı tabii. O elemeleri devam ediyordur da. Acelesi yok pek. Acelesi olan bir görev değil. 20'nin.
I could see SpaceX doing that. We'll see though. We'll see.
20'nin pek acelesi olan bir görev değil. O yüzden pek yakın zamanda bir update göreceğimizi düşünmüyorum. Yani bir yeni haber göreceğimizi düşünmüyorum 20'ninle ilgili. Olursa da ilginç olur. Daha çok araçla ilgili, yani kullanacak Starship ile ilgili özellikleri görmek istedim. Görürsek güzel olur.
I could be explaining what I'm doing, but I don't know if y'all would
Bu arada
think it's
yayına
interesting
konuk
or
alabilirim
not,
bu arada.
so,
Discord'dan bana yazarsanız yayına sizi konuk alabilirim. Herhangi isteyen birine. Starship'e konuşmak şartıyla tabii ki. Genel olarak konuşmak şartıyla değil. Sonuçta konunun amacı bu. Evet, şimdi bizim mesaimiz başladı. Bekleme mesaimiz başladı. Bekleyeceğiz. Yapacağımız başka bir şey yok. İşimiz.
Yeah, you can see it from out here as well. It was a really obvious frost ring down on the bottom, and now from the longer shot, we don't see the frost ring anymore. So
I think that's pointing to perhaps some sort of abort or recycle of some kind.
Şimdi umarız ki abort değildir. Abort yerine recycle olursa bizim için çok daha iyi olur. Yakıt tekrar yüklenecek gibi gözüküyor. O zaman bu güzel. Vaktimiz olur. Ben de yemek yemiş olurum birazdan. O benim için iyi olur.
This was some sort of weird fueling test. I don't know. Right now, they are not super close to a Starship, right? Or a Starship.
Demek ki Putin abim bunu düşünememiş. Neyse devam. Dünkü mü? Ha, bugün şey yayını da var. Ya umarım aksama ya o kadar ileri gitmez bu yayın. Yani ateşleme yaparız, erkenden bitiririz. Çünkü gece de saat 12.30'da Firefly yayınımız var. Onu da yapacağız. Dün Firefly fırlatmayı deneyecektim ama önce bir menzilde bir şey oldu. Bölgeye bir şey girdi. İşte fırlatma bölgesine bir şey girdi. Ne olduğunu bilmiyoruz. Menzile bir şey girdiği için fırlatmadılar. Ardından recycle'ladılar. Süreci yenilediler. Yeniden başlattılar. Bu sefer de ikinci aşamanın basınç tam olarak ona bakayım hemen. Doğru bilgi vermem lazım benim burada.
I don't believe that had an entry burn on it. However, I could be wrong. That was a bit ago, and can't say I've looked at that document recently.
Yeah, it was that old FCC document.
Helyum basıncı düşüş olmuş. Şimdi şöyle, bu yakıtın içindeki yakıtın basınç tankın basınçlandırması için helyum kullanıyor. Belli şirketler, yani daha doğrusu genellikle helyum kullanıyorlar. Bu helyumlar da küçük karbon fiberden yapılmış tankların içinde oluyor. Buna da deniliyor. Basınç tankı deniliyor daha çok. COPV diye geçiyor. COPV diye geçiyor. İşte buradaki COPV'lerin birinde işte helyum basıncı düşük geliyor. Bu yüzden de erteleniyor. Ben de şaşırdım, ne oluyor dedim.
And that included just a brief overview of the orbital test flight profile. That was a while ago, and so it's probably out of date at this point. They might have changed it. Don't know how much, but it's probably been tweaked since then. Maybe we'll get an updated flight profile at some point, or maybe we'll have to wait till they're actually ready to launch it. Maybe SpaceX will provide an overview then. But the latest official word was that no entry burn required, that the booster is designed to withstand re-entry on that return to launch site profile without an actual burn. It's just the engine bay will be built to withstand those temperatures on the way down. But a very good question there from Shutter. Appreciate that. Let's see.
Blue Origin patlamış, evet. Efe şeyi de geldi şimdi. Efe bildirimi de geldi. Gelen bilgiye göre sıkıntı yok. Yani her şey yerinde, inceleme yapılacak işte. Biraz sürebilir. Sonuçta insan uçuran bir roket. Genel olarak. Bu yüzden beklemek gerekiyor biraz. Hazır mı yemek?
That is You know what? You could probably
Ateşleme
do
olmadı
something.
ama başta ateşleme
If you
olmadı.
know the
Daha var gibi.
circumference of the booster, and you can
Merhaba, hoş geldiniz
guesstimate the
Apollo,
thickness
hoş
of the
geldin.
ice, that could give you the volume of ice that's on the booster, and then just multiply that by the density of
Roket bugün yola
water
çıkmayacak.
ice,
Bugün bir
and
ateşleme
you
testi
could
var.
get a guess.
Bu gördüğünüz
Does anyone
itici.
want to do that, man?
Motorlarını ateşleme
I don't know if I want to be
için
doing that. I'll
yakıt
have
doldurma
live
yapıldı.
commentary.
Şimdi
That
tabii
sounds like
yakıt
someone from the
boşaltılıyor
back
göre.
channel should do
Boşaltıldı
that.
daha doğrusu.
I don't know
Umarız
how
ki
thick do you
bir
think the ice is on the outside of the booster?
süreç yenilemesine gidilir ki bugün ateşlerler.
I'm sorry.
İşte buna
Less than an
ertelenen
inch.
diye almak istedim çünkü cidden çok fazla Starship yayınımız oldu. Hepsi erteleniyor.
Thick enough to
Ya bu
be
gidişle
visible,
ertelenen
but
yayınları
not thick enough
liste dışına
to
alabilirim belki.
stop the flight. So somewhere between there. I'd imagine like maybe a half an inch or an inch or 3 inches. I don't know. Scale is kind of
Yeah, I
weird
feel like
at
it's
this
even
point.
maybe even less. I'm thinking like a centimeter or something.
Yeah.
Şimdi yeni gezegen arayışı yok o öyle değil o. Yeni gezegen arayışı değil. Artemis roket diye bir roketimiz de yok. SS roketi. Artemis görevinde kullanılan SS roketimiz var.
Yeah, you know what? Here's
SS
what I'm
roketi
gonna do. I'm gonna find
fırlatılamadı. Niye?
another question
Ya,
for
yakıt
the
sınırsı
Nick,
oldu
and
vesaire
while Nick
oldu.
talks about it, I'm
Şimdi
gonna
bunların
do the
üzerine
math and
çalışıyorlar.
get
Bunu
back to
düzeltmeye
this question
çalışıyorlar
'cause
mesela.
now I'm curious.
Düzelttikleri gibi. Şimdi tek kalan
I
şey
can absolutely do math on this.
bu
Now, here's
araçta
what we're
bulunan
gonna do. I'm gonna find another question
imha
for you first.
sisteminin bataryalarının yeniden şey yapılması. Daha uzun süreler için sınıflandırılması.
Well, here's one we kind of already answered. I'll ask it really quick. Brian asked
Yani
me
bu
if we
kaldı
really
sadece.
do a full hold down
Yani bu
booster
yapıldıktan
test
sonra
with all the Raptors
Artemis
plus
görevi
directly
başarıyla
headed
fırlatılabilir ve
before they do the orbital flight. You want to just touch
bizim
on
zamanımızdaki
the final cert before
ay
flight
görevleri
readiness,
başlayabilir.
basically?
İnsanın ay görevleri başlayabilir bu
So
şekilde.
before they fly, they're going to want to make sure that everything is
Orası
ready.
öyle evet.
Best
Bak
way to do
Starship'in
that
ayrı bir
is
hype
to
var
do
bu
a
ateşleme
kind of
konusunda.
full run through
Evet.
33 engine ignition sequence.
Starship Booster romanı tek başına 9 motoruyla yörüngeye çıkabilir mi? Teorik olarak evet, çıkabilir. Tabii biraz daha değiştirmesi gerekiyor Starship'in sonra. Mesela yakıt tanklarının boyutunun yükseltilmesi gerekiyor. O yük bölümünün de boyutunun düşürülmesi gerekiyor. Bunu yaparsın, yörüngeye ulaşır. Ama yeniden kullanılabilir olabilir mi? Sanmıyorum.
So that is something that they definitely want to make sure that they know is going to work on launch day. And so part of that is going to be doing a 33 engine static fire. Likely it will be held down to the pad. Otherwise, I think with 33 engines producing thrust, even at minimal levels of thrust, it might go somewhere if it wasn't held down tightly. So I definitely imagine they'd have it held down, if not have some kind of mast at the top, or maybe extra propellant at the top or something to keep the booster pinned down to the launch pad during one of these tests. But yes, that's one of the big milestones, probably the last huge milestone that we're looking for. There are obviously some milestones leading up to that 33 engine static fire, but after the 33 successful 33 engine static fire, I would imagine it would be pretty much ready to go.
Thank you for that, Nick. Here's what I'm doing. We got the diameter of the Starship, the super heavy booster.
Reji'de mesaj geldi. Evet Barış attı.
Or sorry, the diameter
Starship kanalına. Discord sunucumuzdan geldi. Yani eğer Discord sunucumuzda değilsiniz, Discord sunucumuza katılabilirsiniz. Burada belli konular üstünde kanallarımız var. Burada belli o konular üzerinde konuşuyoruz. Mesela Starship kanalından geldi Adem'e. Starship kanalında her türlü güncellemeyi orada paylaşıyoruz, sohbet ediyoruz. Açıklama kısmından Discord sunucumuza gelebilirsiniz.
Yeah, I'd say so. I don't know. Maybe a whole centimeter.
Evet Mustafa bu konuda haklısın. Özür dilerim. Bunu bugün yaptım. Bugün ertendi yazdım. Çok haklısın. Çok özür diliyorum ben bunun için. Onu şey yaptım. Bugün düzelttim.
On the camera when it falls off. So I would go with a centimeter or thicker.
Okay, so that gets us an outer circumference.
Evet tamamdır. Reptilin olmaz. Reptilin işi olmaz ustam.
I guess I don't really need circumference. I just need the area of those two circles. I don't know, I'm absolutely doing this math because someone asked and so I'm going to do it.
Yes, and we'll be getting smarter because of it. Because Lord knows I didn't do great in math. There's a reason why I just take the pictures.
Şu an beklemekten başka yapacağımız bir şey yok. Bekleyeceğiz. Yani işte chatten soru cevap yapacağız işte. Soru sorup cevaplayabilirim. Elimden geldiğince. Bunu yapabilirim.
But as I'm going through and editing pictures, I have to count up to 9 fairly frequently. And you'd think that would not be the most difficult chore ever, but I surprise myself every time I go to count to 9. It's difficult for me sometimes. So I'm glad you're doing the math, Thomas, because I sure shouldn't be.
All right, in theory, I'm kind of rounding some numbers here because I don't want to make too many assumptions based on especially because of how thick the ice is. but the area of the cross-sectional area of the Earth should be like 0.14 square meters then. Which again, that's very small, but then multiply that by, it's 70 meters tall, the booster, right?
Yep. Give it
So-
70. Yeah.
And so again, we're rounding slightly. But that gets us 9.8 cubic meters of ice. Now, what is the density of water ice?
I can hear you typing, like as
I
you-
am literally Googling it. 0.917 grams per cubic centimeter. Alright, so now I gotta convert that to cubic meters. Hold on. Well, I'll just convert the area. So 9.8 meters cubed to centimeters cubed. That gets us, that's 9.8 times 10 to the 6th. And then if I take that and multiply it by 0.917, is that right? Yeah, so, and then, alright, so we got 8.9 times 10 to the 6th grams. No, there's no way that's right. Hold on, so I did something wrong. Chat, what did I do wrong? I just said everything I did, but that number's not correct.
on the fly math about flying off.
This is, yeah, doing math a lot.
Şu an gelişmemiz yok. Böyle devam edeceğiz. Böyle devam edeceğiz. Ya bak bu şimdi bu süreyi izlemek biraz hem sıkıcı hem eğlenceli. Şu anlamda. Ya çünkü ya en sonunda şey diyeceğiz böyle. Bak bunları hepsini izledik. Bak nereden nereye geldik.
No
Yani
pressure, no pressure.
şimdi bugün fırlatmayı izliyoruz. Mesela bundan atıyorum 5 ay sonra. Atıyorum 5 ay sonra. Bu motorların bak tek tek tüm testini yaptık diye izledik. Beraber izledik. Yayınladık. En sonunda son anını izleyeceğiz böyle artık. Bunun bizi nereye götürdüğünü işte. Patlayacak mı yoksa hedefine ulaşacak mı? Mesela inecek mi? Bunlar heyecanlı anlar olacak. Açıkçası ben yani nerede olduğuna bağlı olarak ve saate de bağlı olarak bu sandalye üstüne çıkıp tepine edebilirim yani duruma bağlı olarak. Yani mesela Starship mi iniyor? İndi mi? Yani inanılmaz bir tepki beni bekliyor olabilir. Siz de aynı şekilde. Çünkü yani bu benim için bir zevk açıkçası. Sonuçta biz ya, bu yola şöyle başladık. İnsanlar futbol izleyip yorumluyor. Beyaz futbol. Yorumluyor. Biz niye yapmayalım ki? Yani sonuçta yapılması gereken bir şey. Sonuçta insanlar bakıyor. O şunu yani izlenen bir şey, yapılan, sevilen bir şeydi yani. Öyle bu kadar da enteresan bir şey değil.
But if Booster 7 had an issue, they would not go and pull Booster 4 out of retirement because actually the pins that connect the Starship to the booster.
Ya bu yüzden bu zevkli bir şey. Yani Starship testini izlemek de aynı şekilde. İkisinde. Daha ilerisi için de aynısı geçer. Sadece bu ilk uçuş için değil. Hani Ay'a gidilecek uçuşta da aynı şey geçerli. Yani Artemis 3 görevinde fırlatılacak HLS için de aynısı geçerli. Ya da artık eğer Mars'a inmeyi başarabilirlerse onun için de onun için de geçerli.
Booster 9 will have a different attachment point. Who knows? We haven't really seen that quite yet. But yeah, we got some ideas there. So yeah, that is the current state of affairs there. They should be able to swap them around if they need to. However, I really can't imagine them doing that, as it would likely be faster just to patch up Booster 7 in whatever regard it was than to rush Booster 8 and 9. Because obviously, if they swap Booster 8 in, then they're going to need another booster for the Ship 25 flight. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, so that's the thought there. Hopefully no need for any of that though, because Booster 7 has a very successful test campaign and awesome first orbital flight.
It's like a shell game. You have to guess which booster the Raptors are under. Like they keep shuffling them around, or they could shuffle them around, I guess, huh?
It's funny, you said that. I went with the analogy of like at a baseball game where they like, you know, on the Jumbotron it's the ball underneath the helmet and you have to follow it around. That's the first thing that went in my head, like what helmet is the baseball under? But same thing, I was right on the same page. Okay, and also, some people in chat are confirming what I got, and I think I just thought I panicked when I saw a big number. The math roughly works out to 9,000 kilograms of ice, which is only 9 tons. I think when I first saw it, I was like, there's no way, it's 9,000 tons, that's not right.
Efendim?
But it's 9,000 kilograms, which is like 9 tons. Maybe that's within.
O zaman bir mola verelim.
Being correct. What's the
Oo,
mass of a
Anıl abi hoş geldin. Vallahi özledik seni ya.
180 tons, I think.
Okay, so all right.
Bunu bilemiyoruz. Yani yakıt neden boşalttığını bilemiyoruz. Ya, büyük ihtimalle yeniliyorlar şu an. Süreci yeniliyorlar. Yeniden yakıt
That does
yüklemeye
seem pretty high
başlayacaklar
though.
birazdan.
Yeah, but
Şimdi ben bir
okay, but
yemeğe
once you
gidiyorum.
fully fuel
Daha
the
vaktimiz var
vehicle,
madem.
the mass goes
Hemen
way
bir
up.
yemeğe
So
gideyim.
as a percentage of vehicle mass, 9 tons is probably almost nothing.
Hemen onu da hemen şey
Yeah, I
yapayım
guess
ben.
so.
Banner
Let's
çekeyim.
All right, so my
my
speculation here. So we're circling back to the question. James Powers, the total mass of ice on a full stack. Oh, that's only the booster though. Oh no, I didn't do this shit. All right, I'm gonna round up. Let's just
Tamam.
say like
Arkadaşlar gelin birazdan gelirim.
because I think I overestimated slightly, but the math roughly works out to the order of 10 tons of ice. And most of that probably gets shaken off or melts as soon as ignition happens, for the record. But I think that answers the question, and that's enough math for on air today.
We've hit our quota of math today. We don't have to do any more math.
We superseded the math quota today. Good lord.
Nice.
Oh man, I hope y'all enjoyed that chat doing
yes.
volume calculations on air. Jeez. Let's speed run a couple other questions.
It's good. It's good.
Basically, what was saying, didn't shuttle have ejection seats at first? That is true. We briefly touched on that just for the first couple of flights. It's also debatable about whether they would have actually worked, but they did exist.
Yeah. And then they had to actually put those mass simulators, like literally like you go to the gym and you get the big weights, like you're doing bench presses or whatever. After they took the ejector seats out, they added some of those back, or I guess they added those into Enterprise so that they would have the mass of the ejector seats up around the front so they could see if it was going to glide correctly with those seats. So when they did the walkthrough of the Intrepid or the Enterprise out at the Intrepid, they were showing these huge weights, and we're like, why are those weights there? And they're like, they're mass simulators for the seats that are no longer there. So very interesting.
Yeah. Let's see. Also, Modi Space Industry says, just woke up. Looks like I missed a bit this morning. Hashtag Thomas Fan Club. Yeah, Modi Space, you missed an eventful New Shepard flight, among other things. But thanks for tuning in and appreciate the support. Oh, Modi Space also says, hashtag Happy Birthday, Mary. So
Nice.
another happy birthday to Mary, of course. Keith Carson says, happy Solar Circumnavigation Day, Mary, being specific. Appreciate that. Jimmy J says, happy birthday, Mary. My birthday is tomorrow, so let's hope we get a great birthday present today with a multi-engine static fire. I agree, and an early birthday there, Jimmy. Appreciate that. Michael says, how many moose can a Starship carry? I think that one's for DOS.
Enough.
Enough.
They're really dangerous to load, though. Like you gotta keep your hands clear when you're loading them.
Let's see. William Hart says, does NASA have time to switch the Artemis 3 over to methane from hydrogen to avoid the loading problem? They do not think that NASA has the time and resources to redesign SLS to be methane fueled. You would need new engines, you would need a new core stage design, you would need new ground support equipment. That is not a trivial thing. Although, worth pointing out that Artemis 3 will use the Starship human landing system, which is fueled by methane. So technically, Artemis 3 is partially methane fueled. There you go. Appreciate the question and the support there, William. Let's see. David says, happy birthday, Mary. Here's something to get a drink to celebrate. Hopefully we will light some candles for you. Or hopefully we will see some candles lit for you, I should say. So thank you so much, David, for that. Space Pope says, thanks for becoming a Red Team member. Is that elected when the Pope stack goes? Is that what that is?
Well, they've already they've already chosen the new Pope, but they let everybody know by letting the white smoke out of the stack.
There you go.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Not official information from SpaceX.
Not official.
Not official information.
Oh man. Fizzy Vlogs, would they launch booster as a test by itself? We've gotten that question before. I don't think we expect a booster to fly all on its own.
Does it have the aerodynamics? Like, it's supposed to have two things. It's supposed to have the mass and lever arm of the ship on top of it, right? And then it's also supposed to have the aerodynamics, like the pointy end of the ship on top of it as well. So I don't know, like, could they possibly put a nose cone on a booster alone and ship it? Maybe, but the thrust to weight's still going to be super high. So can they throttle down enough Raptors to make the takeoff thrust to weight not or be correct when there's no ship on top? I don't think we're going to expect to see one fly by itself, right?
Right, I don't think so. Although I'll point out that aerodynamics is pretty much irrelevant with enough thrust. But also, I mean, if they did something like SN5, SN6 style, like hop test, then you're not going fast enough for aerodynamics to matter.
Yep.
But but I still agree. I don't think that's in the cards. I think they'll test the booster by launching it with a ship on top, and then after stage separation, do booster recovery testing things.
Right.
Um, let's see. Another message here from James Dury says, "Sad y'all didn't cover Alpha yesterday, but at least we got some sick 4K views from Tim. Yeah, the live stream views from Everyday Astronaut for the Firefly test flight yesterday were very good. Looking forward to watching that again later today. That space flight don't really have the ability to stream it from there. The view from the press site isn't like a super clear view. You only see it after liftoff. So we left the streaming to Firefly and Tim yesterday, and they did a good job. Definitely looking forward to watching again.
Slight correction: we do have the ability to stream it from there.
Well,
we didn't have
we can.
the access or permission. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
We could easily stream lots of cameras from there. We just didn't have like access to the views where we could see the rocket while it was being fueled and stuff like that. So
right.
All it takes is an email. Just let us know. We can show up and provide even more views.
Right. Flawed Perspective asking, what do we think flies first between Firefly, SLS, or Terran 1? Or Terran 1. My personal prediction is that Firefly flies today, so I'm going to say Firefly. But cool that there's a lot of new rockets out and about. Starship in that mix as well, as far as rockets that will hopefully be flying for the first time soon. So we'll see what ends up happening. But my prediction is Firefly. All right, another question here, or another message. James Power says, "Thank you for the maths, Thomas. Appreciate that." Simon says, "Happy birthday, Mary. It's my birthday today. Also, happy birthday, Simon."
Nice.
Joran saying, "Happy birthday, Mary. I appreciate all of the happy birthday messages, and I hope Mary is getting all of these. We'll definitely relay them all. We appreciate it." Ultra Neo with the new Capcom membership as well, so we appreciate that support very much. Texan Mirror is saying that it actually cannot be a centimeter thick of ice. It was less than 1,200 kilograms of ice on shuttle external tanks, and Apollo was less than 1,000 kilograms, according to some internet numbers. All right, so there's some fact checking with some different vehicles. I didn't know those numbers were out there. So I wonder if it's just way thinner, or if it's just that the frost is like way less dense than like proper ice. And thus the number is way higher. But those numbers seem like more realistic simply because when we have talked in the past with different companies about basically do you have to factor in the ice and things like that, they've always said no. Like the weight and aerodynamics effects of the ice on the outside of the rocket is so negligible they don't even really have to factor it in.
Yep.
So that those numbers along the order of 1,000 kilograms do seem more in line with those answers.
Now,
so thank you for that.
We said, did we say shuttle in there? Hang on.
They did mention shuttle.
So shuttle had the Sophie though.
Right.
So the SRBs wouldn't get ice on them because they're not cold, and then the main tank had the insulation on it. So you would expect there to be a lot less ice on an insulated tank than on an uninsulated stainless steel, tumbler or whatever you want to call this. So I guess Saturn V, it was painted, but they didn't have a bunch of big insulation on the outside of those tanks, right?
There was. I mean, if you look at a Saturn V launch, you can see the ice on the rocket.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's interesting to think about, even if we don't have the exact answer. And that's exactly what you got to do sometimes. You look at other things, what can we compare it to, that sort of thing, and sort of come up with an answer or an estimate or a guess or something. But certainly SpaceX has done the math, right?
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Also, Chad pointing up about the that the Starship Super Heavy stack does not pass the pointy end up test without the ship being stacked, so they can't fly the booster by itself.
There you go.
So good to know. Oh man, let's see.
We need like a list of rockets that don't follow that rule. Like, have there been rockets that don't follow the pointy end up rule?
That one Proton launch a couple years back.
There you go.
Let's see. Chat also just asking for another update. Right now, we are basically standing by to see what SpaceX is going to do next. They went into propellant loading operations, so they started loading at least liquid oxygen. I didn't catch if there was the liquid methane engine chill vent. Assuming it was, that would have meant they also started loading methane. But the frost ring that we saw in the liquid oxygen tank has since receded and gone away. You can see in this view there's not frost on the vehicle. So they seem to have backed out of that part of the countdown and the frost has receded. Not sure what they're doing now. They're kind of in a state where they could spool up right back into propellant loading any minute now. So we're standing by to see if they recycle and get back into the countdown at this point.
Yeah,
But they're
they have
not
plenty of time.
Yeah, testing is not imminent right now, but they have a window all the way out till 8 p.m. Central Time. So a little under 8 hours from now.
Yep.
Let's see. Another question here. What are the team's thoughts on a nuclear-powered Starship? Given the obvious advantages, do you think that in the future we'll see Starship with nuclear engines or something along those lines? I
mean,
think. Well, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead,
go.
Tess.
No, a lot of people, I guess, don't 100% understand nuclear engines, right? And right now, we don't have an engine that you would use to have the booster or Starship sort of take off. There's nothing that Starship could, I guess, you wouldn't use a nuclear engine to land, right?
Right.
And so, could it have some more efficient engines to use in space? And could it have like a mixture of nuclear engines for space, but then the Raptors to actually land, or whenever it first separates or whatever? You might be able to see something like that, but that's not anything SpaceX has even hinted at working at, right? I don't think even Elon has meme tweeted from the bathroom that was something he was thinking about, has he?
I think the closest they've gotten is that, in the distant future, SpaceX is certainly open to investigating more exotic propulsion technologies. And maybe they've done like super basic, napkin math as to what might be required. But I think they're going to stick with chemical rockets right now because that's what works and that's what they need to get to orbit and start sending stuff to Mars. I think things like nuclear propulsion or electric propulsion, things like that, are distant evolutions of vehicles that might not even be called Starship anymore. Like that's a far future development. Might not even be SpaceX doing it. Might be other companies or agencies. But um, in the future, obviously, that technology in theory is pretty well understood as to what benefits it could come with, really high efficiency and things like that. I just don't think it's anywhere in the near future.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I'm going to keep some questions coming here. Crispy saying, why can't Starship HLS transport astronauts from Leo to lunar orbit for Artemis 3, assuming the astronauts get into HLS via Orion? So the goal of launching the Starship to lunar orbit before the crew even launches on SLS is so basically you can check off as much of the Starship stuff, the most of the lander stuff, before the crew even leaves the ground. Because that way, if the lander has any sort of issue that needs to be worked while it's in space, the crew isn't sitting in lunar orbit like waiting for the lander to be ready. You can launch the lander to low Earth orbit, check it out there. You can refuel it using the propellant depot. You can get it to lunar orbit and have it sit in lunar orbit, all the systems checked out and ready to go, and then the crew launches. So the astronauts are not sitting in lunar orbit or in low Earth orbit waiting for the lander to be ready. That
Yeah.
limits how much time the crew is sitting in space ready, waiting to go. Um, and so that's why they structure the missions that way. Also, it does lend itself to less work for Starship because it can get to lunar orbit without the crew and the crew commodities on board. SLS and Orion deliver those commodities directly to lunar orbit. But a good question there. The question from Good Gremlin Media is saying, what's to become of the 30-ish million dollars worth of Raptors still on Booster 4? Booster 4 was Raptor 1s, weren't they?
Yes, Booster 4 should have had a bunch of Raptor 1s, which there were 29 of them, and they're still underneath Booster 4 in the rocket garden, which is really cool, actually, because you can get quite close to it. You get a lot closer to Ship 20 at the rocket garden just as a public person on the public street. But yeah, you can get pretty close to the 29 Raptors just sitting there on Booster 4.
Right, gotcha. So I think there's not much use for them for those engines though, right? They're Raptor 1, they're outdated technology already.
Yes, they are.
So anyway, so that answers that question there. Josh Wright asking if we know what went wrong with New Shepard, any videos of the crash. We only have video from Blue Origin of the abort itself. We don't have video of what the booster eventually did, and no word yet on the cause of the failure. That's obviously going to come after an investigation. John Halstead says, thanks y'all for the hard work and happy birthday, Mary. Appreciate the support there, John, and the kind words. Here's a question for us saying, do we think NASA will ever use Starship or Falcon Heavy to replace the cargo variant of SLS? So here's the thing. cargo variant of SLS has already been replaced, actually. The only mission that was assigned to the cargo version was Europa Clipper, which has since been reassigned to Falcon Heavy, simply because SLS needs to be made and kept available for crew launches. So Falcon Heavy will be launching the Europa Clipper mission, and there's no plans for a cargo variant of SLS anymore, at least not anytime soon. In the distant future, once SLS is flying, once Starship is proven out to be a more reliable vehicle, there is definitely a question of, will the crew variant of Starship, not the human landing system variant, but the variant that launches crew from the surface of Earth to orbit or wherever, that variant of Starship could eventually take over for SLS as the crew launch vehicle. But again, there's a lot of work that has to be done before that variant of Starship is actually flying and able to take over. So SLS will be around until that happens. But I think that answers the question there, Crispy. Other questions here.
Lots of questions.
Tamamdır, evet.
Yeah, there was lots of questions. So Terry's saying,
Yemek molasını atlattığımıza göre geri geldik. Hala durum aynı gibi, pek yakıt yüklemesi göremiyorum.
Thank you NSF team and happy birthday Mary. Thank you for the kind words and hope you're enjoying visiting Starbase here and there. And another question from Joe here. Is there any particular reason why NASA aren't planning to recover the SLS boosters other than reefer cost? Or is there
Evet, şimdi o zaman durumumuz aynıysa böyle devam edeceğiz. Yani pek gelişme göremiyorum.
It actually dates back to preparing for the Ares 1 launch days. Basically, through that program, they removed the recovery hardware because they were having trouble getting the performance out of Ares 1 that they needed to get Orion to low Earth orbit. And so it became an expendable vehicle there. And that didn't get re-added for SLS. Basically, it was a trade-off between how much money they save on recovering the boosters. For shuttle, it was more or less breaking even rather than actually saving them a significant amount of money. Of course, the SLS boosters on the first couple.
Hiç sormuş mu? Niye yemeği diye soramamış değil mi? Tamamdır.
Are being reused. There are casings that are being reused from shuttle flights. But eventually they'll be building all new casings. They'll also be moving to the Block 2 SLS booster design, which is basically optimized for cheaper manufacturing methods and a little bit more performance. But all those things considered, they decided it wasn't worth it to recover the SLS boosters, unfortunately, and so it will be a fully expendable vehicle. It comes down to cost considerations and performance considerations. Computer Services, thank you for the Super Chat support there. We appreciate that. Let's see, what else?
Pek sanmam. Ya bunun için izin almazlardı. Uyarı kağıdı dağıtmazlardı. Uyarı kağıdı ateşleme zamanlarında dağıtılıyor sadece.
Originally, the interplanetary transport system that preceded all of Starship was 12 meters diameter, and then they downsized it to 9 for the current iterations. I think at that time it was 42 engines on the booster, which worked out kind of perfectly. So yeah, I would expect more engines if the diameter increases, yes. All right, let's see. Could Booster 7 land or be caught with only 2 Raptors in case a problem occurs with one of them? So like, does it have engine out capability during the landing?
Yani hazırlarımız da var, yani yolu kapatmamız da uzun.
I don't know specific.
Ya şey olmazsa, yani biraz daha olmazsa kapatırım yayını. Bir daha olursa artık şansımıza. Ya, birisi dışına alın bu yayını.
Spirit of the question, how many do they have engine out redundancy? I don't know if 1 Raptor is enough for a landing burn. I think we'll need some updated word from SpaceX and some updated numbers from Elon before we really answer that question fully. There's certainly some minimum. I don't know if they can go. Obviously, if all the engines fail, obviously you're not going to be able to land. But I don't know if 1 engine is enough or if they can lose a couple. Let's see. Another question from Adrian saying, given how Blue Origin have not yet delivered BE4 engines to ULA, could Elon sell Raptor engines for Vulcan? The work to swap out an engine, even though it's the same propellant for Vulcan, like swapping out Raptors for BE4, that's still not trivial. Each individual engine still fires at a different mixture ratio. So even though they're both methane and liquid oxygen, we mentioned earlier how each engine is optimized for slightly different mixture ratios. Um, Raptor definitely fires at different mixture ratios than the E4 does. So the work to retank the Vulcan booster is not trivial and wouldn't be easy to make that swap. So no, basically they could not do that. They would have to redesign the entire Vulcan first stage.
It's too many people used to Kerbal, where you could just
Right,
like,
Kerbal is easier.
yeah, it makes that little snapping noise when you take it off, and you snap it back on. You just put another engine in. No big deal. It just change the symmetry, add it up, see what the rest of the way it is, and ship it. Slightly more difficult in real life, it seems. Folks, again, if you're standing by, earlier we saw a little bit of a frost ring down on the bottom of Booster 7. We saw a lot of venting and some ice forming down on the bottom of it, but then the frost ring went away. So we're not sure exactly, again, no official statement from SpaceX, but we're not sure exactly on, did they do some sort of intentional test? Are they trying to hold it at a specific temperature? Did they tank it and then detank it? Did their hydrogen seal not seal correctly? And then they had to hit it with some cryo load to try and reach. Oh wait, wrong rocket. But we don't have an exact understanding or information from SpaceX on exactly what happened here.
Telefon üzerinden internet hizmeti ne zaman gelecek? Acaba iPhone'lara uydu bağlanma özelliği geldi. Şimdi iPhone'lara uyduya bağlanma özelliği geldi. iPhone 14'e geldi. SOS için geldi. Ama bu düzenli bir şey değil. Ya olması için bayağı bir gelişmesi lazım bu teknolojinin. Starlink için de SpaceX T-Mobile'la ortak çalışacak telefonlara getirmek için.
Today we saw that spin prime a couple days ago, and potentially the next step here may be to actually license these Raptors. But again, no official word from SpaceX. Haven't seen a tweet or anything like that. Did see the frost appear and then saw the frost go away. But lots of time left in the window, and we're here for it, watching some tanks down there in Texas. Continue to ask us some questions. If you've got questions, tag us in chat at NASA Spaceflight, and we will try to answer them. We're also reading the super chats and things like that on occasion. If we all get super bored, I'll ask you where you're watching from. Not right now, don't tell me. Just save it for later for when I actually ask. But anyways, we're here. This is the old school Yeehaw Whipcrack Horsewinny Texas tank watching as we try to see what we're going to get out of Booster 7 today.
Oh, that was a throwback right there.
Right?
Or the Whipcrack Horsewinny. I like
it's been a while.
It has been a minute.
I'm not familiar with that. What is that?
Does that predate Nick?
It might predate Nick.
Wow.
What?
What?
That's the old Texas Tank Watchers slogan. I don't know, motto. Whipcrack Horsewinny. Like we would always we would always joke that, you know, we needed like a logo or something that was like Texas Tank Watchers, yeah, Whipcrack Horsewinny. Nobody could actually do a Horsewinny, so we just say the word Horsewinny. Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Oh my gosh.
So that's the old school Texas Tank Watchers, Whipcrack Horsewinny, yeehaw.
Yeehaw. I love it.
Oh, how you doing, Nick? Heard a siren yet?
I have not heard a siren. I'm staring the cop down. I'm like, you better turn your siren on. So we'll see. We'll see if he does a siren. But yeah, I'll let y'all know.
It looks like
is asking what the airspeed velocity of an unladen Raptor is. I don't know if we have those numbers in front of us.
Oh geez, like imagine you could turn on infinite fuel and you could just fly a Raptor with
that's
no
exactly
fuel
what I
tanks
thought
attached.
of too. Thank you.
We need
playing
so
much Kerbal lately. I've gotten into KOS. It's bad DOS. It's so much. It's so much time.
Oh my gosh, I never got into KOS myself because I knew that I would spend way too long doing it. Because I was
exactly
a programmer.
what I'm doing.
Like originally, I was a programmer. I worked for many years doing web programming and like e-commerce systems and CRM systems and this sort of stuff, like moving data around with bits of code. So I did my time as a programmer. Let's put it that way. And I would spend way too much time on that. So I never got into KOS. Some crazy things people are able to accomplish with KOS. Have you seen like the self-assembling space stations?
That one was amazing. I saw that on like r/Kerbal Space Program or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like a capsule with all the modules, and then it's just KOS. They all like separate and fly on their own, and then self-assemble. That was amazing.
Yep. Very cool.
Yeah, I'm still on the launch scripting phase, but we're getting there. We're learning things. The one click to orbit is still very impressive to me, and that's where I'm at.
Nice.
Click to orbit. That's like better than an SSTO.
Single click to orbit, SCTO? I don't know.
Huh. I'll allow it. That's fine.
This is just
Alright,
a simulation, so I'm told.
It's all a simulation. All right, we digress.
It's physics inspired, Nick. It's not like a
That's true.
simulator. It's like physics inspired.
I like it.
Oh man! All right, let's bring in some more questions here. Willem, I believe is the name, says, "What is the maximum payload of Starship?" We know it's 100 tons plus something, right? Do we have an official number that's more recent?
It's right now.
180 tons. I remember, right? That was one of the Tim's interview videos. I think it was it Booster 4?
Double?
7? I don't remember. Okay, I'm gonna shut up. I don't remember.
Well,
I don't remember.
The number 150 was out there somewhere at one point, but I think it just keeps changing.
Yeah.
Well,
This is
they have
it's a massive pet peeve. Chat, please don't come after me for this. But right now, the payload to orbit of Starship is 0.
Well, yeah,
It
that's
hasn't taken anything to orbit, okay? And so when people come in and they're like, "Oh, Starship can do 100 tons to orbit. Oh, Starship can do this," and it's like, well, theoretically, that's they want it to do that, but right now it can do 0 tons to orbit, and maybe one day it'll do something to orbit. But so often
Evet,
people
geldi.
are like, "Oh, just throw everything away. Let's not fly Starship." It's like,
Cidden
I have high
Starship
hopes.
yönünün
All the
vazgeçilmezi,
best of
beklemek.
luck.
Yani
They're
direkt
talented
bekleme
teams. They're
kısmı.
gonna figure it out, but right now,
Bekleme
its
kısmı
payload to
cidden
orbit
öldürüyor ama
is in
yapacak
fact
bir şey yok.
0.
Ama sonucu güzel oluyor. En azından
Come
sonucu
at
güzel
Chad.
oluyor. O yüzden
Are you telling me you can't just strap a
dayanmak
payload to the top of
gerekiyor.
Booster 7
Sabır.
and let her
Doğukan
fly?
sen sabır.
I mean, that's about
Don't
what
even
they're
need a
gonna
ship.
do. Payload's name is Ship 24.
Yeah, that's true.
It has to be
Ya
waving
falan
a
ben
full
kutlu
send
sanatlarım
flag,
yakıt
though.
yüklemiyorum.
Like
Var
whatever
mı?
you put on top has to have a little flag on the top that says full send.
The flag can have some aerodynamic problems. Maybe
Ya
just
buzun
throw
yükselmesiyle
it
anlarız bu
inside
durumu.
full send.
Yakıt yükleniyor mu yüklenmiyor
See,
mu?
no, use it like that the supersonic little spike on the front of the NASA experimental supersonic jets, and you use the spike to create the envelope for the rest of the rocket. You just need a really long spike with a flag on the end.
The pitot tube, of course.
There you go. But I don't think the flag would make it very long. Like, it would probably not.
You know, guys, I think I just figured out why we don't work at SpaceX.
Because we're too cool. Like our ideas are too awesome even for Elon. Jeez.
Sure.
It'd be like the tarp from that scene in The Martian where they just put a tarp over the Mars ascent vehicle and it just rips off like a minute into flight.
I'm still wondering what ripped it off. Like, there's no atmosphere on Mars to really rip it off after a minute of flight.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Anyway, we digress. This is what happens when SpaceX recycles a test. We're just sitting here, the vehicle isn't prop loaded, so now what do we talk about? We talk about flags on rockets.
This. Cool ideas, honestly.
Let's see. Oh, here's a good question, though, on that topic. Admin asking if they did a detank event on Booster 7. That was the one thing.
Şu an bugün daha çok ya bilmiyorum, bu ateşlemeden daha çok beklediğim şey Firefly ya. İşte ulaşabilecek mi ulaşamayacak mı? Bence önemli olan kısmı orada. Sonuçta yeni bir şey ya yeni bir şey. İlk defa yapacaklar.
Chat says I think folks are confusing SpaceX and Estes, like the model rocket company.
What?
Oh man,
So they're very similar.
There's like a BPS space plug in there somewhere. Like the line between
Burak daha ateşleme olmadı, hayır.
Estes is
Daha yakıt dolumu durdu işte.
Exactly.
Yeniden yüklenmesi gerekiyor.
Shout out to Joe Barnard. What other questions we got here? We got another super chat here asking about Blue Origin status. Again, we don't know anything more than Blue Origin has said about the New Shepard flight earlier today. They had a New Shepard flight failure. The in-flight abort system worked perfectly, so that's good. But they did suffer a booster failure, and they're definitely going to be standing down before they return New Shepard to flight. Wouldn't expect that to have any knock-on effects to like New Glenn or Vulcan because different systems there. But also not super relevant to Booster 7 coverage. So we'll touch on it here, but we don't really know anything more.
Devam edebiliriz.
So not much to report there.
Ya şimdilik böyle beklemeye devam edeceğiz. Ben o zaman biraz Photoshop yapayım o sırada.
I was confused for a second because I glanced over to look at this camera and I was like, oh my gosh, the poor grass. For a second, I thought that was the grass fire, but that's on this side of Highway 4. There was no fire on this side of Highway 4. It's a cloud.
It's a cloud. Yep.
The cloud is covering up the grass in the foreground, so it looks super dark, and then the background is actually lit up. You see that on the screen? I took the overlay away.
I thought you were looking at like the sandy spots where like stuff might have like gotten burned or something like that. I didn't realize you were talking about how dark it is. Because like now in the background it's way brighter. I see what you mean.
I was so confused. Like Lance, I'm cycling through the cameras, and I've got a screen that shows me other cameras, and I looked at that one, and it's like, what is going on? But it's literally just a cloud over the landscape. No gloom and doom about, oh my gosh, everything's destroyed. It's just a cloud, folks. Anyways, I was confused for a second. Put the overlay back on so we can see what's going on.
I'll bring in more questions though. Here's a question for you, Nick. Derek is asking any word on why Ship 24 is connected to the crane.
Ooh. The word on the street is that a crane needed to do some weight training.
Ses eko böyle yansıyor mu ses?
Nick, I have my doubts about throwing you this.
Mikrofondan geliyorlar yani onu da ayarlayayım.
I'll answer for real to you. So Derek, the crane there is likely going to demount Ship 24 at some point. Does not look super imminent.
Tamamdır. Speed'i kapatalım ya.
But it's possible, probably sometime this week, that they will take Ship 24 off. And where it's going after that, we don't really know. There are a couple different places it could go. One, it could just chill out like Ship 20 did for a little while. Just somewhere around the pad, just chill out on special T's or maybe on some blocks, just chill for a bit while V7 finishes its campaign. But there's also a couple other possibilities. One of them is that they do a full stack with it at some point in the near-ish future. Just have pretty Elon Musk's full stack pictures, so do I. So, maybe they'll do that.
Şu an galiba o eko olayı düzeldi.
Somewhere at the production site just to protect it from some of the elements. Now that it's pretty much, I don't want to say flight certified because that implies other people, but pretty much ready to go and finished its testing campaign. And perhaps they want to protect it from some of the partial Coca Chica air because DOS, you know just how fast things that are not stainless steel rust. So, yay.
But yes. I mean, it's a very tough environment out there, and if you have things that are just sitting and they're not protected either by slathering on old ship amounts of paint or making them out of something that stains less, like stainless steel. It does stain, it just stains less. It's not stained, like, stain-proof steel or no stain steel, it's just stainless steel. So anyways, they definitely degrade really quickly out there. We have a couple solar frames that are in need of some TLC, Nick. I know you're aware of that, so. Yeah.
Nick sounds thrilled at that.
800 million degrees, but yes.
Hopefully they make it until it's a little cooler out there, so. Anyways.
Nick, we've told you a million times
A million times? Okay.
I have my counter up.
Does not look cool right now though. Look at the shot here from our south.
Bak bu şey de olabilir bence. Neydi? Polaris 2 de olabilir bence. Polaris'in ikinci görevinde olabilir yani. Buna bir göz kırptı Jared. Jared Isaacman buna bir göz kırptı ama emin değilim tabi. Ama bak şimdi şeye bakarsak belki de yani kendiyle yani yakıt ikmali sırasında da kilitleniyor sonuç olarak ya o da olabilir.
It's definitely a possibility. It's not unprecedented to have two Starships down at the pad. That happened with, was it ship SN9 and SN10? Those were the two ships that were down there, right?
Good question, Nick.
I believe so.
I'm pretty sure. I'm gonna say a good old South.
Ney? Güzel. Yeniden oyundayız. O zaman yeniden oyundayız demektir. Güzel.
SN9 and 10 that were down here at the same time. But it's definitely possible if they bring ship 25 down. The only thing is, ship 25 is not finished yet. It's still not fully stacked in the what's that one? The high bay. I keep wanting to say the mid bay, but it's not the mid bay, even though it's the high bay. But it's not the highest thing around because there's the mega bay. Oh boy. Yeah. So 25 might come down, but we'll see.
Cool.
Ne diyeyim? Gel buraya da beraber edelim ya Latif. Buraya gel de beraber edelim.
All right, other questions.
With one stone. Yay.
James Atkinson says, when running optimally, does Starship or SLS load prop at a faster rate, and how do the rates compare to Shuttle? So I believe
Evet,
SLS
docking kenetlenme oluyor.
shuttle. In fact, it's almost exactly the same, I think. But Starship, I mean, maybe this is a question for Adrian because we have seen countdowns draw out a little longer on Starship and Super Heavy, especially recently as they've done like loading more propellant. I know it's like it seems slower than they get for like Falcon 9 and stuff like that, but it's also possible that that's part of testing procedures and that operationally the fuel load will be way faster. I don't know. I don't know. Any information or thoughts on that?
Tamam ya, adam canım ya, canım adam
Well,
adam.
as you mentioned, it's all still a big testing campaign, and I know that one thing that they're still working on and trying to get solved, as Elon has mentioned many times, Stage Zero, the ground support equipment, is the biggest hurdle down here at Starbase right now, and so I would not be surprised at all if they're
Ya
not
motor soğutması var sadece. Hani motorlardan buhar çıkıyor da geri kalanı yok işte.
Those are some venting
Geri kalanı
noises.
olsa aslında çok güzel gidecek.
I mean, I was just saying like it's another vent, but I didn't see
Ben
exactly
Photoshop'u
what it
açayım
came from.
abi.
We're starting to hear
Her
this
türlü
regular venting noise.
işlerimizin başındayız.
Cool. But yeah, so and that vent totally threw me off track. What was I talking about? What was I talking about? Dang it.
They're just talking about how eventually they'll probably hone in the fueling rates for Starship.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, prop loading. Yeah, it'll get better, I'm sure, and probably even faster than Falcon 9. I'd guess this rapid reusability and all.
Yeah, I mean, although all things considered, Falcon 9 fuels very quickly, and Starship and Super Heavy is an even bigger vehicle, so maybe all things being equal, it's roughly around Falcon 9 time. That's still less than an hour. I don't know. It seems somewhat feasible, at least for what Elon is doing here.
Is it refilling or refueling? I know on orbit stuff is
Evet, bir
refilling.
yandan da Ukrayna
Okay, so
bayağı bölgeyi şey
here's
yapıyor,
Elon
mahvediyor. Hadi
likes to say
bakalım.
refilling
Bölgeyi
because he's
iyice
like, there's
açıyor.
more liquid oxygen than liquid methane on the vehicle, and it's not, liquid oxygen isn't fuel, it's oxidizer, it's propellant. So he likes to be a stickler and say refilling. Refilling includes refueling because you do still
Evet,
put
şu anlık
methane
yakıt dolumu
back
yok.
into
Ya
it, so
Latif soğutma
it's
var diyor
interchangeable
sadece.
realistically.
Ha, bu durum bu yani. Pek
That
bir
is
şey
the
yok.
difference. It's not just fuel. You are also loading oxidizer, which is not fuel. But you could say repropellanting doesn't really roll off the tongue.
Repropping, refilling. That's
Yeah,
close.
right. Refilling is the term that Elon likes
Yeah,
to use.
I like it.
So, let's see. A couple other messages that have come in here. Secret Orb says happy birthday, Mary. So the happy birthdays keep flooding in. That's good.
And I
Jim
did
Couch.
just talk with Mary just a few minutes ago. I did just talk with Mary a couple minutes ago, and I mentioned that all y'all are sending her all the love, and she had a really big smile and she said thanks. So
That's
thank
good.
you for Mary.
That's awesome.
Let's see. Jim Cap says here's to some rapid fire today. Appreciate that. And Chris Roberts with the super chat says a big thank you to whoever gifted the membership that I received. It happened without me noticing. There you go. Thank you to everyone who gives memberships, and thankfully everyone who receives those memberships. Hopefully they enjoy. And of course, thank you for that super chat. Let's see, some more questions coming in here. Here's one. Vimexia, was that more venting? I think we're hearing just intermittent venting from different
We're hearing
things.
intermittent venting, yeah, exactly.
Does SpaceX need special permission to do interplanetary missions?
He probably has to check with the Martians and the aliens first, but yeah, no reason why he can't.
Well, Elon has said he's an alien trying to get back to Mars, so I'm sure he has a good connection there.
True. Just phoning home.
But no, realistically, I don't think NASA or any other agency technically has like jurisdiction over interplanetary missions. Granted, SpaceX will want to abide by all of NASA's interplanetary rules because obviously NASA is a major customer for them. But I don't think they technically have to if they just want to like burn that bridge, which obviously they wouldn't do. But I don't think there's official legal structure for like what interplanetary missions that aren't government operated like have to follow, right?
I honestly don't know. Space law is something I did not study in school.
I think it's like you better play nice here or we're not going to want to play with you otherwise, don't know if it's like technically illegal, but you should get along and do it.
Yeah,
That makes
maybe the better way to say it is, just don't do anything that'll piss someone off, because there are other consequences that can come from that.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so a good question there, and that has been the topic of, like, as this, I don't know if you want to call it a new space age is upon us, when
It's
all of these recent
dumb.
developments, there's been a lot of talk of, is there room that we need to actually restructure some legal things so that we're better prepared for settling space and things like that. Oh my goodness. On that note, we've just gotten a huge amount of support. Paul LeMadeline, I believe is the name. Paul, first of all, sent a $150 super chat. Whoa. Says, happy birthday, Mary. Have a wonderful day. So there is a big chunk of support for Mary and the NSFT movement. I know Mary will appreciate that. And Paul, thank you so much. Paul then followed that up with gifting 20 Red Team memberships. Whoa. Paul, we're glad you're enjoying the coverage. Thank you so much for that support. It allows us to expand and continue to improve the coverage and keep doing what we're doing. So, Paul, thank you so much. That's really, really appreciated. Oh,
Ya bak, bakalım yani şimdi niyeti yok demek yanlış olur. Sonuçta bir test şeyi bu. Yani test edilmesi gerekiyor. Doğru zamanda yapılması gerekiyor yani. Bir şey yanlış demek ki yapmıyorlar şu an.
Say that on occasion. I don't know if it really lands with people, but like, what can you really say to somebody? Y'all know that I say, well, the thing for us to do is to keep on the coverage and keep on bringing views and keep on showing you all, sharing what's going on out there. So, Paul, thank you so much for the support.
All right, let's see. Thorif asking, could they put Artemis 1 on a SpaceX booster if the SLS stage 1 keeps failing and use SpaceX booster 7? That is not compatible. Again, it's not curable. It's not easy to just swap out entire rocket stages on the fly. You need to be compatible with your ground equipment. You need to be compatible with the rest of the vehicle. You need to test everything together. So no, they cannot. Let's see here.
Hala vent var aslında da.
Out there, by the way, Thomas.
Yeah, it really is.
As I've been sort of sitting here watching all the cameras and stuff like that, I can really see the cameras start to shake, especially out on the beach side. Like out this way, these cameras are really starting to shake, and the gusts look like they're unofficially up to like around 20 miles per hour almost. So we won't leave you on Jello cam here for too long, but we are keeping an eye on the winds. Now, I don't think that the wind specifically would affect this test, right? Like,
Yok can siren yok hayır.
Just the camera views.
Yeah, just the camera views, just the stability of the camera views. Let's get off Jello cam there, sorry.
There, the close-up, the crane.
Şu an güzel olacak tek şey ya Elon Musk'ın bir tweet atması olabilir işte. Atmaz tabii canım. İşte bir görsel durumunu da atıyor artık, o kadar pek de detay vermiyor.
It's hard. It's without humans for scale, right? Without a banana for scale, it's difficult to attain the scale of a rocket, right? And with Ship 24's recent 6-engine static fire that happened last week, it rattled some of our cameras. In fact, so much so that it disconnected a few wires in one case. And it was just kind of crazy to walk back up to the equipment that we had deployed after the static fire and realize that this rocket that is like so far away, like not super far, but like thousands of feet away, impacted our gear inside the launch box. It's like, whoa, that is crazy amount of power. And so, exactly, so much vibration. And so if SpaceX can do anything to any of those vibrations, kind of hit me the other day. These actually do have a whole lot of power.
And that was, 6 engines on Ship 24.
Exactly.
That's not even 33 engines on the definitely gonna need some preparation.
Hop, yayınımıza bir katılan olacak. Yakıt dolum da yok, evet. Yakıt dolum da yok.
Let's see. Oh, here's a good question. How long can Ship 24 sit before having to do another static fire if booster testing takes longer than expected? Spirit of the question, is there an expiration on the static fire, or like if it sits too long, is it worth doing another static fire because the data's just been sitting there and you want to re-verify that everything's working? I don't know.
Well, let's just hope it doesn't sit too long.
Right, that's true. Let's see here. Keeping an eye on the progress of testing here today. We're keeping an eye. You're still seeing some vapors here and there from the engine bay. We haven't really seen firm indications that they've gone back into propellant mode, but hopefully that's the next step. The big sign will be when frost ring develops again and stuff like that.
We also didn't get the big depress, like the huge vent and massive amount of noise where they tank it up and then it completely goes away. So
Yeah. Let's see. Question about any information on the orbital launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. No, they rolled out the last section of the tower for KSC pad. So they haven't stacked it yet, but they're finishing up the tower. And as far as the mount goes, we're waiting for the actual table, like the top part of the orbital launch mount, to roll out. That has not appeared yet. They're still working on constructing that out of Cape Canaveral. Yeah, so the latest is the last segment of the tower is being prepared to be stacked and assembled. The launch mount is still in work. I think they're still working on also preparing the chopsticks and QD arm and stuff like that. But once the tower is finished stacking, maybe they'll be able to move into that. Stay tuned for our new flyover video, which should be coming out in the next day or so, which will have the latest imagery on that front. So thanks for the question. Let's see here. Jim Cabot says, "Happy birthday, Mary." So another birthday wish. Appreciate that, of course. Dijuan with a Capcom membership, so we appreciate that support as well. Richard Brook with a super chat. Thank you. Ben says, "Glad tidings on
Pek gerek yoktu ya Blue Origin'e yayın açmak için.
Appreciate that support.
Şimdi yayınlarımızı azalttık biraz, fark etmişsinizdir. Çok fazla yayın oluyor. Ya insanlar da şey yapıyor, giremiyor artık. Zevk yapıyoruz. Hem o kadar önemli bir uçuşta değil.
Russ is asking if SpaceX knows in space that
Ya,
the
bu yüzden.
Starship with people on board has tiles missing. Do they roll the dice that the stainless steel survives a re-entry? So this is, of course, alluding to something that most spaceflight people know too well. There's a lot of data acquisition that goes through knowing how much heat shield damage is acceptable for re-entry. These are assessments that NASA did for the space shuttle after the Columbia disaster all the time.
İticideki motorda bir sorun çıktı ve yani çıkmasının ardından kapsülde bulunan katı yakıtlı itici ateşlendi ve kapsülü uzaklaştırdı. Uçuş başarısız oldu yani. En azından kapsül güvenle indi.
yeah, I mean it's different because you're asking a question: what are they going to do if there's a Starship that has people on it, and there's not even a Starship that doesn't have people on it, right? There's not a Starship that's re-entered, so there's going to be a ton of learning between now and then, right? And they're going to look at what happens. They're going to inspect. I hope that they have some way when it's on orbit to actually inspect the underside and see the heat shield tiles so that they can document, okay, all the tiles are there, okay, we're missing tiles in this location or whatever. And then when they go for reentry on an uncrewed Starship, they can learn, they can get actual experimental data on how it works, right? So I think it's one of those questions, right? But it's going to depend, and there's a lot of learning.
Sineği mi? Yani sinekten kastımız bir tane kanatlı bir uzay aracıysa Starship. Oysa eğer göreceğiz. Kesin konuşamıyoruz.
Yeah, and go ahead.
No, I was just saying, anything to add to that?
Sorry, I think we might have a slight delay here. Yeah, I mean, obviously, more data, more better, as we always like to say around here. And yeah, the fact that they really don't have an orbital flight test on these heat tiles would indicate that they probably haven't gotten all the way through. As Elon likes to say, critical path is getting to orbit. And after that, then they'll start working on these slightly larger problems, which, yes, definitely is a big thing. If you have humans on board and your heat tiles rattle off, then, well, that's not good. But I have confidence in SpaceX that they'll be able to figure it out and get a good engineering solution to either resolve the issue or have a good workflow that fixes and mitigates the risk for the crew in whatever.
Latif orada mısın? Gelişme var mı?
Yeah. And oh, sorry, go ahead, Das.
No, I don't want anybody to think it's a cop-out answer. I mean, it's the truth. Like,
Yeah,
there's a lot of
exactly.
data gathering that needs to go on before anybody would be prepared to make a call like that. Right now, they just would not have enough information to actually make the call. Now, if something happened and they were redirecting an astronaut or an asteroid with a bunch of spunky oil drillers or something like that.
Ya en iyisi ben kapatayım yayını. Eğer bir şey olursa açarız geri. İzlediğiniz için teşekkürler. Bir sonraki yayınımızda görüşmek üzere diyelim. Hoşçakalın.